Welcome to KP Death Radio. This is Melanie Sorrentino and...
Mark Sorrentino.
And...
Nick Baxter.
Sure. Tell us about you. What's up?
I'm a 32-year-old artist and tattooer. I was born and raised in Connecticut, in the New Haven area, and moved down here to Austin, Texas about 5 years ago. And I've been working as an artist, as a painter and a tattooer for the past 15 years, and I've sort of lived my whole adult life on the fringes of society, so to speak, not involved in any kind of corporate job structure, and just figuring stuff out on my own. And so I guess I have a different perspective than a lot of people who do the 9-to-5 thing and just a very standard routine of conformity.
So, 15 years ago, did you think any of this was going to be your life now, or did you just things kind of... Yeah. Yeah,
I did. I had a vision for my life, and I've been able, luckily, to achieve a lot of it. I was always a very internally motivated child, and internally driven by my own goals and visions. And so when I became a teenager, all that started to manifest for me as I discovered all kinds of underground subcultures like anarchism and hardcore punk music and graffiti art and tattooing and all these kind of rebellious anti-establishment subcultures. And I started to manifest a vision of what my life might look like, because I knew I was very much not resonating with the status quo of society in the way it was given to me growing up in basically, the rich white suburbs of Connecticut. So I had this vision of doing exactly what I'm doing now, and more, and I'm still working on more. But yeah, it definitely has slowly and at times very difficultly come into place.
So, okay, I'm trying to understand how you wrap your head around, knowing, how to live such an alternative life. It just seems like everything that we've got going on is so cookie cutter and so obvious, and the alternative is so... It just seems like you really have to find some really good gems to know what to do, or else you're just going to figure it out, and sometimes that takes longer than others to figure.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have incredible struggle when they try to go off the map, so to speak, or off the financial grid or off the actual grid. And I don't live completely off any of those grids, but I'm on the fringes, and I participate as little as humanly possible. Or I should say as little as is possible with my current lifestyle. So for me, it's been a lot of personal, emotional struggle as far as isolation and alienation from my family, who's very traditional and conservative. Isolation and growing apart from various friends and colleagues and people that I've cared about, just because I do tread kind of an awkward path that leads me through a lot of gray area. So that's been a real struggle for me, and still is to this day. But as far as the sort of materialistic or the mechanical aspects, I've actually been incredibly fortunate and lucky in that it's all just naturally, organically fallen into place for me. I just happen to be gifted with a skill of art that also happens to translate well to tattooing, and I was a natural at tattooing. I picked it up very quickly, and the concepts and the techniques of tattooing just came naturally to me, and I was able to excel at it from a very young age, soon after starting my tattoo career. And so I just was able to relax into this artistic niche of being able to earn a living on my own terms through tattooing. And a lot of people have a ton of struggle with that, but maybe they have less struggle on the emotional side or something. So there's sort of two sides of the coin there. My material life has worked out brilliantly because, like I said, I just fell into like this economic niche where I am still able to like put food on my table and a roof over my head in, you know, financial sense by doing something I love to do that's fun that I would be doing anyway even if I wasn't getting paid for it. So I'm able to follow my passion and get paid for it, which is fucking brilliant. But, you know, a lot of times I struggle with the path that leads me down as far as like isolation from my family and friends and stuff like that, and just feeling cast out of society is just a burden that people like you and I will always kind of feel, just because that's just how it is. So,
is it alienation just from like a value system, or just like the logistics of how your lifestyle set up?
Yeah, I guess it's more conceptual. It's like a value system. You know, and I can talk about ways that I try to like subvert that alienation, but logistically, it's not so much logistically because I just rent a house. You know, I live like tons of other normal people live. You know, I just rent a house and I participate minimally in the capitalist economy, you know, and I try to live sustainably and responsibly and consume as little as possible, you know, with my resources and my spending. And so the logistics aren't too alienating. It's weird though, because now that I'm in my 30s, a lot of the more conformist lifestyles, when you get into your 30s, you have kids, you have a family, you actually own it. You actually own real estate instead of renting.
Yeah.
You know, you have like a 401k, you have this, that, the other thing. So logistically, I am sort of separated from all that because I see a lot of my peers and people I went to high school with and people in my age group, like definitely the differences as you get older and as you get into your 30s, the differences when you choose the lifestyle I've chosen start to become way more drastic. Like everyone's still feeling out their life in their 20s, you know, and like hardly anyone has everything all set up into that like structure that I just listed. But once you hit your 30s, man, people are starting to really buy into either that or you get really, really secluded in your lifestyle niche as an outsider.
So the information that kind of opened you up to this when you were, you know, 15 years ago or whatever, is that, how do I say it? Do you continue to find more information to confirm that you're on the right path, or is it just this is where you feel comfortable, or how does that kind of go from there?
Yeah, well, when I was like 14, 15 years old, I started to discover punk rock, and through punk rock I started listening to some bands who talked about anarchism and who were really like anti-establishment, and they would give out like literature at their shows, and they would have cool essays like in their CD booklets, in their liner notes and stuff, and that opened up a whole world of information back then. And then from there I just started reading a lot of anarchist books, a lot of philosophy, a lot of psychology and stuff like that, just anything to wrap my head around what I was feeling, and because I was feeling very, very different and very isolated from the cultural, social norms that were around me in white suburbia. So
like
from
what?
there, yeah, that was a stepping stone, and now I still do read tons of philosophy. I read a lot of like spiritually oriented things to try to figure out some of the more esoteric aspects of existence, and I'm still learning from my anarchist friends here and there, and still getting inspired by new ideas that they're working with in their lives, and so yeah, I still am taking in new info. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that does. Is there like a elementary form of that, and then there's like when you kind of get more immersed and it has more complexity? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, is there like a beginner's kind of thing, and then there's like the actual lifestyle? Is there a difference between the two?
Yeah, I think when you're a teenager, you're still living with a parent or legal guardian, and you just discover these new, exciting ideas. You can kind of play with them. You sort of like play dress up, and like you and your friends can act rebellious, with minimal consequences, because you're still sort of being cared for by an adult, even if you have a degree of independence at that point. You know, you're still not completely out on your own. Like, if your shitty high school job doesn't work out, like, you can still, like, go home at night to your parents or your legal guardian's place or something, For most people, not everyone has it that easy or that good, but so that's sort of like the beginner stage is like, yeah, like, me and my friends like started going to protests and stuff. Like, we went to when George Bush was about to be elected for his first term. I got really involved in like direct action and civil disobedience type protests that were happening at his inauguration and the Republican National Convention. And so I could sort of play in those scenes, in those worlds, sort of get my hands a little bit dirty with anarchist ideals and anti-establishment type of lifestyles, but kind of still had a little bit of a safety net. And then I went to art school for a few years, for actually 1.5 years, and then I paid my way through that. There was no one paying my tuition for me. So I was working a lot of shit jobs and getting financial aid from the government and just kind of struggling through that. And so that's sort of when the safety net starts to fall away, and you're sort of like in a little bit of no man's land, like you owe the government some money, and you still have a job, and at that point I was still living with a family member, so that made things a little more easy. But then I dropped out of art school once I got my tattoo apprenticeship, and from that, and that's when the rest of the safety net kind of falls away, and like my family was like, hey, like, you're on your own now, like, if you're gonna drop out of college and make this choice, like, go for it. Like, we're worried that you're not making the right choice, because that's an extreme thing compared to what the rest of my family has done. So then shit gets real, and it's like, you can't just like fuck around at a protest and get arrested and have it just brush off your shoulders real quick and not affect your life. Like, if you get arrested, or if you're up to no good or up to something sketchy and shit falls through, like, there's gonna be hell to pay. Like, you're gonna spend time in jail, you're gonna, you could get fired from your job, like, shit gets real. So, things become more complex and the stakes get higher the older you get and the more on your own you get. And I've realized that in my own life. So, it has affected some of the things I do, and you just have to have a different decision-making process.
Like what?
Well, there's more pros and cons to weigh with everything. Like, if I want to participate in certain protests or certain sort of anarchist activities, I actually have to make sure that my tattooing schedule is clear if there's any potential consequences to be faced, so that I'm not fucking over like a dozen tattoo clients who are relying on me and who like paid deposits to have like travel plans to come see me to do their tattoo appointment. So just stuff like that. I also have 2 companion animals, 2 cats. So it's like who's gonna take care of my cats? Like, I'm a grown ass man. Like, I can't just have my mom like feed my cat. So there's stuff like that, and just like, like the legal ramifications of getting your name in the books and stuff like that. But I've kept my name very, very minimal as far as where it shows up. So I'm sort of treading a fine line there. I have anarchist friends who are completely off the financial grid, like don't even have a driver's license, like have nothing, and they're a lot more free to get their hands a little more dirty, because there's less potential consequences. So, I just have a more complex decision-making process maybe than those people.
How do those guys make money? How do they make a living?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. It could be like various odd jobs and just trying to like scrounge up money any way you can. Some of them get on food stamps and sort of like welfare programs and stuff to try to just like milk anything they can from the government. And
so you're kind of the exception.
What's that?
So you're kind of the exception. Like you get to do both.
Yeah. So the thing I was describing before of how I fell, just a stroke of luck or whatever you want to call it. I just fell into this like very convenient niche of like, I have a skill as a tattooer that is very in demand in today's society and culture, with tattoos becoming very trendy and popular. and people willing to pay very good money for what I do. So I can afford to sort of have a fringe lifestyle, but not have to like scrape and scrounge and maybe do a lot of the sketchy, uncertain stuff that some people I know have to do. It also affords me to not have to rely on others. Like a lot of those people, they rely on the goodwill of friends to like sleep on couches or to like help out around the house in exchange for a couch to sleep on, you know, and there's a lot more community necessity, which I'm afforded a lifestyle where I don't have to necessarily live with a lot of those restrictions, but on the other hand, there's a very big downside to it in that I really struggle with a lack of community in my life because I'm able to not have it. So that's kind of an element of privilege that I'm still struggling with. I feel very, like, you know, that's part of my, like, white guilt burden of, like, how privileged I am financially that I actually don't have to have a strong, close-knit community around me to rely on the way some of my other friends have to in order to survive. You know, and that gives them a lot of emotional support and strength that maybe at times I feel like I'm definitely lacking in my life. So, you know, there's pros and cons to everything.
Do you ever kind of imagine what your life would be like if you weren't living, like... It's hard to say because it's your values, you know? Your life reflects your values, and you can't imagine not having your values, so it's hard to really think about that.
Well, if I wasn't being an artist, if I wasn't selling paintings and doing tattoos for money in order to sort of survive materially in this capitalist economy, I would probably be trying to channel my values and my beliefs into some sort of like social work or psychology work to like help people in need. You know, I try to do that indirectly through my artwork. Just, you know, art can inspire people and spread ideas to people in creative ways that make them think differently. So that's a function I try to serve with my artwork and with my tattoos. And I also, because I am lucky to have this sort of like economic niche that pays well with tattooing, I definitely donate a lot of money too. I just straight up give money to organizations, to activists, groups that need it. So that's a way I can sort of feed my values, act in accordance with my values, and give back in ways that I'm unable to, because I don't necessarily always have the time and energy or lifestyle freedom to do too much crazy shit. So yeah, if I wasn't doing what I'm doing, I'd probably try to still be as fringe as possible, but have the necessary like degrees and certifications to do like some sort of social or psychology work.
Dude, I'm really sorry. Continue.
Oh, I was gonna say like maybe try to channel that work into progressive communities or anti-establishment communities, because there is a need for mental health and self-care and a lot of stuff, especially in fringe communities and outcast groups, because they deal with a lot of the burdens that I was telling you about before, just like depression from being isolated from society and feeling like you don't fit in anywhere and being at odds with your family and stuff. So, and, you know, it's something I care about.
Man, I'm really interested in fringe stuff because I've spent like so many years working, putting a lot of energy into job stuff to make, you know, to feed my family, you know, so to speak. It's like there's no leftover energy for creativity or to even give back in any form or fashion. It's basically like all the leftover time after working is pretty much just like coping with whatever that is that happens when you're at a job and you're just doing that kind of a thing.
Yeah, just losing your soul is what happens. So you need that time, like you're saying, to like recharge your like spirit, like your life force that's drained. And I have a very close friend right now who struggles with that dilemma almost on a daily basis. I mean, she has a lot of the same values that I have and a lot of the same lifestyle goals that I have as far as wanting to live sort of off the grid and more sustainably and more peacefully, and not in a big, dirty, loud city and stuff. But she has a job that drains her every day of all of her creativity and passion to pursue her hobbies outside of her job. And so she's working with a very low tank of energetic emotional gas, and so the two parts of her life are at odds with each other. There's a constant conflict between work and energy to pursue her goals of getting the hell out of this fucked up culture, economy, etc. So, and that really, it pains me to see that, because I try to be encouraging, but it's hard when you simply don't have the physical energy after a hard day of work to do any more thinking, or to put complex, multi-stage, long-term goals into action. It's easy to have like a short-term goal of like going to the movies, or like a short-term goal of like making something that you're into, like, you know, just doing like a short project around the house. But it's really hard with that lack of energy and time to start to embark on like really complex, large-scale goals, like finding a piece of land and buying it and starting your earth-rammed earthship structure. So, you know?
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to see that, and it's hard for her to relate to me also, in that I have a job that isn't really a job. It is my values. It is my creativity. I'm profiting off of my own natural energy, and then that fuels me. I actually don't feel drained from that. I feel inspired from that, and so I have more energy to do more projects with. And so I don't have this conflict between two areas of my life. I have the two areas of my life are in sync and moving forward and complementing each other, which, you know, I feel very fortunate about. Like, I totally know what you were saying with the lack of energy and just needing that recharge time that keeps you from doing other things.
Which makes me think of what you were saying earlier about like the youth of America living at their parents' house, but dabbling in things that are a little outside of the box, because it's like you have the time and the energy to kind of invest in trying something new, which which later just it's not going to be there.
Yeah, or at least it's there, but it's difficult, and there are severe consequences if you fuck up.
Yeah.
The stakes get higher, and that really is a discouraging factor for a lot of people. It takes just a sheer force of willpower and inner drive and passion, and just that life force to really push through the odds and like follow what you believe in. And it takes a high threshold of suffering. Like, you have to be a person who's willing to suffer. That's just a fact. The world is set up to be one way right now, and it's not the way that you and I are talking about.
Yes.
So you have to be willing to suffer a lot if you're actually going to pursue any kind of fringe lifestyle long term. So you have to build up that threshold of suffering, that like threshold of pain, and be willing to endure hardships that other people would just give in and not want to bother with. So I don't know. I mean, when I dropped out of art school to pursue tattooing, I still wasn't really making money at it yet. I was still working some shit jobs, and I had to be at the tattoo shop. So I was just like working myself ragged, and I was dumpster diving food and stuff like that, and trying to save money wherever I could. And I was willing to endure a lot of these like hardships because my passion was strong enough to override whatever pain or discomfort or inconvenience I was feeling. So if people can access that like driven, motivated part of themselves, they can. It really is possible to overcome a lot of obstacles that people sort of use as ways to not pursue their goals, or use as reasons to not pursue their goals.
Dude, that's really interesting that you say that, because I know a lot of people who are really good people who care about a lot of really important things, but they don't feel like suffering is part of the path, and they don't feel like they have to take on anything. I don't know, and I don't know what that means, but I know that what you're saying is definitely in conflict to a lot of really good people I know, in addition, to a lot of people who are shitty that I know, that they just don't need to take that on, like that's not their thing or whatever. But yeah. I understand what you're saying.
I think that's my theory, and it's only my theory, is that that's a product of like the privileged upbringing in America that we have. We have a lot of convenience. Suffering is not a part of our cultural paradigm. Our cultural paradigm in America is very short-term consumer pleasure. So suffering isn't a cultural value, and so it's shunned and it's pushed away and it's avoided at every turn. And then by the time you become an adult and you have to face this really hard shit that we're talking about right now,
Yeah.
Suffering is not a part of your personal mental paradigm, and you're just like, no, I shouldn't have to do that. But that's fucked up. Like, or more of like the woe is me type attitude of just like, oh, poor me, instead of just like sucking it up and suffering some. But there are cultures around the world, that aren't as privileged and short-sighted as American culture, who have this innate appreciation or this innate acceptance that there is going to be suffering throughout life, and that's and that's okay. And I think as Americans, and especially like younger Americans growing up in this like consumer saturated culture, we really have to do some hard emotional / spiritual work to reorient our attitude towards suffering, and not see it as bad and pleasure good, and just have this like super simplistic like caveman mentality about it. Like, there's a whole spectrum, there's a whole range of what's tolerable and intolerable, and you can situate yourself in various places on that spectrum to achieve goals that you want. So, I don't know, that's something I've tried to do personally, that's why as I've gotten older, I've sort of started to research more of like the spiritual and the esoteric side of things, because that helps me with the suffering that's inherent in my life path. So that's serving a very direct psychological need. I need a way to make sense of the alienation and the suffering that I feel in pursuing my goals and not giving in, or giving in as little as possible to social and cultural pressures. So we need to work on that, I feel like. That's my opinion. And another thing is community. Just having a supportive community can help you endure many hardships. Like, we are social creatures biologically. We are meant to be in relationship with one another biologically and primally on a very deep level. So we definitely need community. And community is hard these days because everything's so split apart by like technology and the internet. Like, you don't have to leave your fucking house anymore. So, really direct in-person caring communities are starting to break down, and like people consider a chat room to be their community, and that's not community.
Dude, I have really mixed feelings on community. I agree that we need it, that I need it. But I've been through so many cycles of community that it just takes time to build a real relationship with someone, and to me that's more one-on-one, and then doing like community stuff is like this group thing, and then I've seen so many groups I've been in dissolve, groups that seemed really solid, just dissolve like overnight, that have been solid for years, and I've been through maybe 3 or 4 of those, and that's really heartbreaking. It's really discouraging, but it's just, it's conflict, it's very conflicting. It's like, oh, fuck,
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. I've undergone the same things in my life with struggles around community. So I have the same inner conflict of like, man, I know I need this, like psychologically, emotionally, to support me in my life, but man, it is so hard to maintain. And so there's this constant like tightrope walk between like having enough autonomy and enough personal freedom and emotional space, and then between that and then being close to people and having like loving, caring connections in my life that will get me through hard times.
I think the added conflict to that would be looking to be in community with people who just have such different values than, when people talk to me or when I'm listening to people talk, it's like, and I do it too, you say everything as though it's so universal, like this is just what we think, and it's like, what if you think something really different, like how do you connect those dots with people? It's so, To me, it's just really complicated. Yeah.
You're talking about dissenting from like the group's party line. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, and like, so how can you have a group that allows for dissent and still cares for that person?
Yes.
Yeah, that's tough. And also, I want to propose a question to anyone who's going to be listening to this of like the whole like chicken or the egg debate of which came first. So, is community hard for us today because of all the factors I described, with like technology and isolation breaking us apart, or is it the other way around? Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's like, are we having this conversation about our difficulties with community because of that? Or is there something in us that makes that technology do that?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I haven't solved that debate. I haven't solved that riddle yet of like which one it is. And maybe it's not something that can or should be solved, but it's just an ongoing process, an ongoing struggle in my life to balance out personal fulfillment and community involvement, and to figure out the ways that, or the things in my life that keep me from community, versus connecting me to people that I wouldn't otherwise get to connect with. So, I don't know. I haven't quite worked that one out yet.
I have a question in my head. I'm trying to form it. Do you, since you're more living on the fringe, so I'm guessing you know a lot of people living on the fringe, or a pretty substantial amount of people?
Most of my friends, my closer friends, are living some kind of, like, on the margins of society as far as, like, not paying taxes at all, or severely lying about their taxes and their income, or just completely off the grid and not even having driver's licenses and stuff, or, like, their name on any utility bills, or people who are playing the financial game, who are able to just do that, but then behind the scenes, so they're acting one way and being legit with their taxes, and they own a legit business, say a tattoo shop, but like, in their personal life and behind the scenes, I mean, they're definitely into some anti-establishment shit, you know, so there's that too. And so, most people I know are sort of, in some way, on the margins of society, and I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Mm-hmm.
You know, like attracts like is the saying, so it's like, of course, I'm going to gravitate towards that naturally, even if I'm not, like, trying to.
Is it like 100% kind of thing? I mean, I know you just said, like, some people are more upfront in one area of their life, and others, you know, are just behind the scenes, but are there people who go in and out, like people who are like, fuck it, I don't care about this shit, and then they just, like, do all this, you know, behind the scenes stuff, and then they're like, no, I can't do it right now, and then, like, jump back and forth while they're kind of getting their feet wet?
Yeah, I've seen it happen when people, like, have kids and stuff.
Okay.
Like, a lot of times it'll be, like, a relationship or a child that kind of forces some lifestyle changes, and then people sort of get back to it once the kid's not an infant anymore and can, you know, and they can have a little more independence back in their life and stuff. But I have some tattoo artist friends who are world travelers, like very nomadic people, just always hopping around the globe, working for short periods in different areas, just doing tattoos. And they ended up having a kid together, and they wanted to, right from the start, like, you know, have their kid live this lifestyle too, and like raise their kid with these values and with these opportunities to see the world, and just they didn't want to do the whole like conformity way of raising a child. So, you know, I've seen them in Australia and all kinds of crazy places, like with infant in tow, and just making it somehow work with traveling with an infant and getting people to help them along the way, and just trying to care for the infant's, you know, physical needs, of course, and taking very good care of it. Like, they're excellent parents. But so they didn't do the whole compromise of like, oh, we need to stop living our lifestyle for a time or whatever. They're like full on. They're just trying to go for it, and it seems like they're making it work okay. But then, I have friends who have also like done the whole settling down thing, like to use the like, oh, it's time to settle down, and so they just sort of like do that just because they have kids or they get into like a husband-wife type relationship.
So you're not doing any of that. So what is your future? What's next? What does a grown man do when he's not doing some bullshit?
Yeah, I mean, because of the way I've grown up and the way I have just a creative, like, exploring type of personality to everything, I've had a real struggle around making, like, long-term future plans for myself. I've always had to live because of my sort of fringe lifestyle and, like, being pretty far off the financial grid. I've always had to live a lot more hand-to-mouth. I don't have, like, money in the stock market where I can, like, buy real estate and, like, really put together a future plan for living. So I still rent. I'm in my 30s and I rent, and I could have just up and leave and not sign another lease if I wanted, and so it's hard for me to answer questions about my future plans, but I have goals. I have goals of, like, I want to have a little bit of better community for myself. I want to be living on a piece of land that I help care for, and I would love to live in some sort of earthship or, more sustainable alternative housing type structure that is very creative and off the utility grid. I would like to keep getting farther away from government control, from social norms and expectations, and not just for the sake of being anti that stuff, but more for the sake of just being pro discovery, pro me and my journey. So I may end up doing things that actually, like, quote unquote normal people do, but I want to be able to arrive at that on my own terms and through my own journey and have it look the way I want it to look, and not have to, like, plug myself into the matrix. So yeah, but that's my future goals, I guess, and just keep making art. And I really would like to push the painting and fine art aspect of my career, and get my art seen by, like, prestigious people in prestigious places, because I want these values and these ideas that I symbolize in my art to crack that world, to, like, infiltrate that world, and maybe try to inspire people. So that's sort of a goal of mine, but I have to get better at navigating that world before I can achieve that goal.
Dude, you seem good to me.
Seem good to you?
Yeah, your art seems really good already.
Well, thank you. Yeah, in that world, to break into the really prestigious, like, fine art, fancy world, I mean, you have to talk the talk and be able to look like you're somebody, and you're going to have to talk and be around people that, personally make me nervous, because I've always been, like, on the fringes with my punk rock friends and whatever. Sure. So there's a game that needs to be played there. It's a definite game with its own weird set of rules, and if you want to succeed, you got to kind of play the game a little bit and figure out a strategy to deal with it. So I'm still working on that, but it could be cool to get my art into certain places and in front of people's eyes, and do my part to catalyze more social change or more cultural awareness or progression and just spread ideas. So that's another goal of mine in life. And, I still just want to keep tattooing because that's fun, and I get to travel the world doing it, and I get to meet new people and have exciting adventures, and, it pays the bills, of course. Yeah. My painting is like a supplemental income right now. But the tattooing is like the regular, like everyday income type thing. So, so I'm definitely gonna still tattoo and have fun with that for sure, and try to travel and see as much of the world as I can. Because tattooing is exploding all over the globe now. Pretty much just about every culture on the earth right now is like having some kind of tattoo renaissance where it's really becoming like a blossoming art form and a blossoming capitalist industry. So I can plug into that, and get my bills paid, and also use it as a chance to see new places and have adventures all over the world. So I'm definitely going to still do that and just learn as much as I can about life and different places and people, and try to bring it all into my own life and figure out what the hell I'm going to do in this mess of a situation I'm in this country. You thinking of more questions?
It's like I just feel a lot like just it's not every day that somebody says that they are pro them and they want to figure shit out on their own terms. It's just, I mean, you can see it in some people's eyes. I mean, some people, it's just like their personality to be that way, to be, curious and willing. But overall, like, I mean, even though I'm into it, I don't hear that every day, and it's pretty renewing to me. So it's like, fuck. It's like, man, what do I even say to that? It's like the final thought, be pro you.
Well, I can maybe add to it a little bit. And I mentioned briefly before that I could add to, like, something I was saying about, like, so I grew up with a very adversarial sort of, like, warrior fighter mentality of, like, fighting the status quo and rebelling against the man and against my parents and anyone who was trying to control me so that I couldn't do what you just said, be pro me and figure stuff out on my own terms. So it's always about, like, opposition and, like, fighting that. And part of my personal journey through life is that I feel like I need, for my own progression, to drop a lot of that mentality and be in the world the best I can, but on my own terms, and not necessarily because I'm fighting it and making some, like, battle to the death with, like, everyone who disagrees with me. That's a real challenge, and that I'm still working on. But I am basically, my point, my goal is to find ways of being me that are actually helpful and positive towards people I don't agree with, so that can catalyze more change and more benefit, and I can see more of the things I want to see in this world instead of always having to feel like I have to fight and, like, it's always like an us versus them mentality. So there are ways of doing that, and it involves a lot of hardcore, like, personal psychological work, or if you want to use the word spiritual, like a lot of spiritual inner searching to be able to approach every human being that you see with an attitude of, we basically want the same things. We have different mental constructs around how we want to go about it.
Yeah. But
in our heart, we want basically the same things, to be happy and free. And how can we structure this interaction so that it's mutually beneficial for both of us, and we don't become adversaries, and we actually find unique and unexpected ways to help each other, like, meet our goals, and then that actually makes the world a better place, as opposed to lots of fighting and destruction. So that's something I want to be pro me, and I want to be on my own terms with my life, but not just in an isolating, like, adversarial way. I want it to actually lead to something greater for me and for me and other people, and how to plug yourself into a situation in a beneficial way so that ideological differences are negated, and it's about human beings, like, making this world a better place, regardless of, like, superficial thought constructs or, like, image-based politics, like identity politics. So, yeah, so that's something that's an ongoing thing for me, and trying to find ways to do that, and just doing the work on myself to be in a better place emotionally and mentally. I think that, a lot of fringe communities actually fall prey to their own adversarial mindset.
Really?
And a lot of people, like a lot of like anarchist groups, it's all about like fighting the man and stuff, which I'm all for. And like I have anarchist beliefs, but when all you're doing is fighting and you constantly align your psychology with an adversarial mindset, I mean, you end up fighting everyone in your life, even the people you shouldn't be fighting. I've seen that a lot of times. I've seen it in myself too. So that's a tough one, And so I think a lot of us trying to walk the margins of society could really benefit ourselves by questioning our adversarial nature and questioning our isolationist tendencies and trying to transcend them. So, and it doesn't mean giving in and selling out and becoming like one of them, but to still be authentic and a whole person and true to yourself, while also not needing to fight anyone or take yourself out of certain situations where you could be a benefit to others or where you could learn something for yourself.
Is there people or organizations that you look up to that, that are doing that are being constructive but still doing things on their own terms?
My friends, my anarchist friends have a collective called Crime Think, and they publish books which have spread anarchist and egalitarian ideas throughout the globe and have done probably a lot of good for a lot of people, just like exposing them to new and great ideas. And so I've always been friends with them and really supported their efforts and try to like rep them as hard as I can, like whenever I have like a platform to speak on or like write about or whatever. It's just like I really dig the way that they're approaching anarchist philosophy and making it accessible to new crowds of people through their writing and through their publishing efforts. So,
do you know them personally?
I do know most of the people who do like the writing and publishing personally. I've helped them occasionally on some of their past projects and lent support to them through the years in whatever way I can. And there are some of the people that I was talking about before who are completely off every grid and somehow making it work and somehow doing this really inspiring like publishing house and anarchist collective. So that's always been inspiring to me because they are 1,000% revolutionary, smash everything, smash the state, yet also being productive and putting out inspiring, unique literature that is helping spread ideas and helping to teach people. They're really a shining example of what you just asked me. So that I guess that's why I thought of them first. And I'm sure there's tons of people. And it sucks that I don't have like a list off the top of my head, but because I'm sure there's tons of people who need and deserve credit and need to be shouted out for like being authentic and true to themselves while still not, while also still being like productive and inspiring, and not just like fighting and negative and like all that sort of mentality that drives a lot of good-natured people to unfortunate things like addiction or just like nihilism, despair.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Okay, so another person I just thought of is really inspiring to me. And I only learned about this person through you, incidentally, is Daniel Vitalis. He's very anti-establishment, very, like, authentic in what he speaks about of, like, his own paradigm of, like, rewilding and, like, getting off the grid and being autonomous and sustainable in your lifestyle and your health practices. And yet he runs a very successful supplement business and is, like, a renowned speaker and lecturer and stuff, and
he bridges gaps. You know what I mean? Like everybody who shouldn't like him likes him, You know what I mean? Or at
Yeah.
least is open to listening to him, which is the exact opposite of how I probably spent like the last 3 or 4 years just being an arrogant asshole to everybody instead of making friends. It's just like, dude, that's such a good point. Like, really bridging gaps and having information that will benefit other people, not just being like, well, I get it and you don't, you're an asshole or whatever I was doing.
Oh, yeah, I mean, we've all done it. I've done it, but yeah, so seeing someone like Daniel Vitalis, like, pull that off, like, pull off his feet, like, he's talking about radical shit.
Yeah.
Like, if you get down to the core, to the heart of his message,
Yes.
I mean, he's advocating the complete dissolving of, like, modern industrial society. Like, really, like, he's saying some radical shit, but he's packaging it and he's filtering it through his unique voice in a way that, like, really is inspiring to people and doesn't come across as, like, negative, like, I don't know, alienating stuff. It comes across as positive and, like, trying to inspire people to work on their health and stuff. So that he's sort of bridging gaps, like you said, but, like, people are going to hear his message because of how he's packaging it, who otherwise would never hear his message and would probably want to throw him in jail. You know?
Yes.
So that's cool. Good for him.
What else?
I don't know what else. I mean, I'm cool. I feel like I got most of what I could say off my chest, so I don't know. It's up to you if you have any other questions.
It's too big. You know that feeling of like, it's just too big. It's like too important, too different. It just seems like a lot of the things you're talking about are just like fundamentally at odds with the way things are, while being a non-issue. You know, like, things are a non-issue until you say it's a problem, and then you fight it all the way. And that's where that big feeling comes in of just, like, something not being a big deal and not being a relief or something. But since it's counter to how things are, it's just like, I don't know, that built-up space. It's hard to really put it into words, but... So I guess I can't put it into words, so I don't have any more questions, but thank you so much for reminding all of us these obvious things. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I mean, the only other thing I can think of to talk about would be, like, the actual mechanics of how I live my life, like, as minimally as possible as far as, like, the financial grid, but still having a job.
Yeah.
I mean...
Yes.
It's all about cash money. Cash rules everything around me. So I work in a cash industry, and I don't buy anything unless I have the money. The actual currency, not numbers on a screen through a credit card. So I don't own a credit card. Never have. I have a financial account through a local credit union, not a corporate mega bank. And I just keep the bare minimum in this account, just for, like, emergency purposes. There's never heavy activity through that account. I'm never moving large sums of money at all. And I keep my cash well hidden. If I ever have any extra around, it's well hidden, and that's what I run my everyday life on. And I just am in the mindset of, I want experiences more than I want things. So all the things, all the possessions I own, just about all of them are serving the goal of my art. So there's this one overriding mission, which is to creatively express myself, and so that there's little conflict in my life between, like, the work-leisure dichotomy. All my leisure purchases and all the things I own fuel and feed into the driving purpose of my creativity, which is to make tattoos and paintings. So if I own something, it's somehow related to that or helps me do those things. So I don't buy shit that I don't need. I mean, a lot of this is just, like, super obvious common sense, but I feel like people forget it because they just get wrapped up in consumerism and just, like, thinking they need this or that, but I don't have health insurance. If I have any health ailment or problem, I seek out some sort of practitioner who I think can help me with it, and I simply pay them cash. So absolutely nothing is on borrowed money. So I am debt-free, and that's a huge thing for a lot of people. So that's important, is to be debt-free. And I don't know, as far as like food and just basic survival necessities, I have some stuff like stored away in case of emergency, like prepper style. But it's all about like making friends with local farmers and going to the farmers markets around here and just getting produce and getting local meat and eggs and stuff like that, and eating very simply like that. Like you'll pay more for that quality instead of like GMO supermarket vegetables, but you save money in the long term. So it's all about finding lifestyle practices that save you money in the long term, because you won't have such and such a health problem, because your lifestyle is geared around taking care of yourself to begin with. As you're not living an unsustainable, unhealthy lifestyle and then having like this leaky faucet of expenses coming out the backside of that, of like all the health problems it creates. So you constantly have to like spend money on all this shit you don't need, really, if you just took care of yourself in the first place. So I don't know, like that's kind of how I live day to day. Just real simple, real survival style, real hand to mouth, but like quality hand to mouth, not like scraping by necessarily, but like I try to spend my money powerfully rather than in quantity. So I'll buy the more expensive like survival needs, like my food and stuff like that, and like herbal supplements and stuff like that to like maintain my health. And it might be more expensive than just going to the supermarket and buying shitty like food and like pharmaceuticals, but it saves money long term. So I'm 15 years into this sort of like fringe economic lifestyle, and I'm making it work completely sustainably. Like I'm able to rent the house and everything because I just don't throw my money away on stupid shit. I make powerful purchases, and I buy quality stuff as needed, but I buy less of it, so the money goes further, I think. And I keep only a minimal amount in a bank account, and I try to make as many cash purchases as possible, and I do a lot of barter through my tattooing, which is really cool. So I'll barter for healthcare needs that I have. I'll barter for food, or I'll barter for any kind of need that I have in my life that takes me out of the money exchange economy. And so that's really cool. So if anyone's able to find anything they can offer to people as a skill or as an expertise or whatever, like you can start to barter and take yourself off more and more off of the financial grid that way. Yeah, so I do all that stuff and just try to take good DIY home health care of myself, so I just can stay healthy and avoid any like major catastrophic medical expenses. I don't know. So that's sort of like the mechanical day-to-day operation of it, is just live cheaply so that you can have abundant experiences. I only need to work a few days a month to really get a lot of my core monthly expenses met. So I have a lot of free time to do work that's satisfying to me and that isn't forced upon me. So if I choose to tattoo more, if I choose to paint more, and then eventually sell that painting, like that's what I'm saying, like there's no conflict between my work and my leisure. My leisure is my work. My work is very leisurely, and the whole process like feeds itself in one direction. Like it's just not pulling me in different directions and draining me. So I'm fortunate, that's definitely a function of privilege, and I completely recognize that. But I think it's possible for a lot of people to do that, and they don't realize it's possible. They have certain obstacles in their head of like, oh, I just need this and this, and like they don't really need that. But And I guess that goes back to our conversation about suffering, being willing to suffer a little bit to then get ahead, and then you won't be suffering anymore. So
definitely.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's all I have on that.
Well, you seem like the real deal. You make some money, but you're not a total lame ass because of it. Which is like the opposite of like people like who don't make any money and then go on a high horse about how money's bullshit. But it's like, well, it's hard to say that. You don't know until you have it, you know? Like what you really think about something. So that's cool that you can check that off your list.
Thanks.
Okay, well, do you have anything else at all?
I guess just check out my website, nickbaxter.com, or my painting fine art website, which is nbaxter.com, the letter N as in Nick, just nbaxter.com. Both websites have all my work and a lot of writings on them, and like a lot of my values are right there that we've been discussing.
Yeah, I'll put a link in there for sure.
Thanks.
Well, thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Forgotten the pipes and the flutes of the dying.